Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Hometown Heroes. I'm Mike Cannici, and I am delighted today we are joined by former Shelton High School great and former Newtown head coach Ken Roberts. And Coach, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor, and I mean, you've basically been involved in high school football for over 35 years.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the talk today.
You know, Coach, let's start right off from the start. Tell me about how your journey to football itself began. I mean, did you have an interest as a little kid?
Yeah, I played 1 year in Pop Warner, my 8th grade season, and I had a pretty good first couple games, and my third game I broke my leg.
Oh, wow.
So my introduction to football was a quick injury and a quick out, but the friendships I made in those couple of games kind of kept me involved a little bit. So freshman year, I decided I wanted to play football, and I played under Bob Riggio.
Right.
Howie Gurra was my freshman coach, and he's an amazing coach.
Right.
He was instrumental in me getting into coaching as much as playing, because he was coaching girls basketball.
Right.
And he's just an amazing coach. So I kind of looked up to him and got into the program, but always really got into more of the coaching side and the X's and O's than more of the playing side. But that's where I started, 8th grade Pop Warner, and then went into Shelton. And even though I had the broken leg, I said, let's give it a shot.
You know, that's interesting. I would think you had played football throughout your childhood, and it really didn't start till 8th grade, huh? That's
when it started. And I was not really that good of a player. I think I was more of a, practice kid and wanting to be involved in something. I never really made great plays or was all state or all league or any of those accolades. But I really loved being a part of the game,
right.
And that was the biggest part for me. So I was more of a coach even as a player. I enjoyed the coaching part of it, the game part of it, more than the actual playing.
Right. Now, did you have a love for sports as a kid, or did
not really? It just came with the group I was with, the players that I was playing with, and the coaching staff. It was just a remarkable group of guys, more like father figures. I didn't really have a father at the time. Kind of trying to find my way. These coaches really helped out in helping me along. Bob Riggio was amazing.
Right.
As you played for him, when you played, might not have been, your best friend, that's for sure. He was definitely hard.
Right.
But I learned so much from Coach Riggio about, work ethic and life and things that are really important. And as time went on, as he was really the reason I got into coaching. I graduated, and I remember him saying, "Hey, Roberts, what are you going to do?" And I said, "I don't know." He goes, "Why don't you come coach with me?" And so I graduated in '86, and I started coaching in 1987.
Wow. So now, obviously, you broke your leg. You didn't come back the rest of that season.
No, I did not.
Were you skeptical about coming out for freshman football? I mean, what was Pop Warner like when you were able to play? I mean, because Pop Warner, I've always said this, that's where all the hidden takes place. That's where you really learn the game. Because when you get to high school, coaches really want you to have already known, the basics and stuff like that. So, I mean, what would you say, even though it was in the short term, did Pop Warner help you at all as far as what to expect?
Tony Piccolo was my head coach, and I remember when I got hurt, he said, "You'll be back." And I was thinking, I don't want to do this again,
Right.
Not really knowing, because I only played 3 games. But they stayed in contact, all the coaches did, and a lot of the players, and said, play freshman year and you'll be fine. And I had some injuries throughout my career, which seemed to always set me back. But the support was great. At the time I needed it, and the friends, the coaches, it was really something that helped move me along through my high school career.
Right. So let's talk about freshman year. You said you played for Coach Gurra.
Yes.
You came at a time, too, where high school football in the Valley was at its best. You had Seymour, who Coach Sponheimer had just taken over the program.
Yep.
You had Derby, where Coach DeCenzo had just taken over the program. And then, of course, Ansonia, you had the legendary Bill McAllister, eventually followed by Coach Lisi and, Coach Hunt later on. But really, the Valley was unbelievable. And, I mean, you talk about Coach Riggio. I mean, he really, Shelton had went through some rocky times in the program. He really turned that program around when he got there in 1980.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to play for him and coach with him. The one thing that not too many people would think about Coach Riggio is the one thing I learned being a player and a coach. He would much rather win over a kid than win a football game. Everyone thought he was all about winning and do everything to win a football game.
Right.
But his goal was not to win games. His goal was to make young players, young boys into men. And
right.
he did everything he could, to shape people to be the best that they can be as a person and instill things in them that help them to succeed. That's what Riggio did for me and a lot of people. I know that during that time in the mid 80s when I played, the games were incredible. But winning the game for Riggio was just, that was the gravy. He was more about shaping young men, and he did a great job. He did a great job with me and a lot of my other friends, and I didn't realize it till 20 years down the road. But coaching with him, each day that I coached with him, I was realizing what type of person he was and what he was doing for people. Right.
So now, how would you say your freshman year went for you personally? I mean,
it was
did you
good.
Start freshman year?
Yes, I started freshman year. I played okay. We had I think we were 7-3 or 7-2, something like that. We had a good season. We lost to Derby and Ansonia. I know we beat Seymour. And those were the only games you kind of remembered as a freshman. It was just the Valley games.
Valley games, right.
So we lost to Derby, we lost to Ansonia, and we beat Seymour. So, we had a good season. I had a good year. I came back my sophomore year. But sophomore year in football is tough. You're basically
you're learning.
You're making on a special team. You're basically the scout team guy, and
you get some hazing from the upperclassmen.
Yeah, I don't know if there was any hazing in Shelton. I think I remember when I was a sophomore, the guys that were juniors and seniors were fantastic to the sophomores. There was no hazing. There was more of a teammate camaraderie than anything else. So that didn't take place when I was at all in my football career at any school, whether it was Newtown or Shelton. So sophomore year was just the usual, get in, maybe special team here and there and stuff like that, and just learning the system.
Though, the fact that you got in a little bit as a sophomore is pretty good, because in a school like Shelton, you could be a good player, but there could be so many better players because it's such a big school. So it's not always easy to get yourself onto the field. I mean, you really have to work at it. So, I mean, you probably left your sophomore year thinking, the future's bright for me.
Yeah, I was, again, the friendships I made were great. So I was, again, more interested in that than the actual playing on the field. And that was there. So I was still going to play. I was looking forward to playing my junior year. And like we talked about earlier, the off season wasn't involved as it is now. Like you would lift a couple days a week, and and then it was just come August you'd have a few captains practice, then you'd play. Now it's pretty much year round, which I would have really liked back then, but because I didn't play basketball or baseball or anything, we didn't have lacrosse at the time, so I would have loved the year round football because I didn't have to do any other sports. But going into my junior year. We had won the Housatonic League as a sophomore for the first time in a long time. I don't know the exact date or how long it was, but
probably the last time was sometime in the late '60s, because I think mostly the '70s it was pretty much Derby, and I think Amity might have won it a couple times. Yeah,
I just remember we won. I believe the game was 7-3. It was at Derby.
Yeah, great.
Walt O'Shea made a tackle on Jeff Rice on the 4-yard. It was something where. It was the play that turned the program around. That's what it was. That's what it was keyed as. And I remember getting on the bus and driving the bus home, and it was traffic the whole way home back to Shelton High School.
Right.
And we got back to Shelton High School, and Ponch Martinez, who was a captain that year, he had said, he goes, "This is what you do this for. These feelings and these friendships." And it was that day was amazing. And, it was something like I was really happy to be a part of.
Definitely.
That day was, I'll never forget that day. And then it was only to be outmatched by the next year,
right?
When we were at home, and I remember
I think it was 21-7.
It was 21-7, right. And it was one of those. It was cold. We went out for warm-ups, and I looked around. I was like, wow, there's so many people there. I tell my son, we used to walk out, and there's people all over, right. And they walk out for warm-ups now, and there's 100 people there. But I remember that game because I actually played a little bit in that game and played some special teams, made a few tackles. So when we won that game and won the Housatonic League for the second year in a row.
Right.
It was now starting to sink in that this program was really on its way. We were really doing something special.
Right, and if you think about it, the playoffs were still in their early stages. I think maybe they were 9 years old at the time. So basically, winning the Hoosier to a lot of teams, that was their championship. So to have 2 Hoosier championships your first 2 years, I mean, you couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah, it was exactly. It was great, and. Then going into my senior year, I was elected captain, and I still, Mike Bucci was a senior. He was the other captain, and those 7 guys that I played with, I still remember.
Right.
You forget this, forget that, but I still remember those 7 guys' names,
right.
and their numbers, and I remember all the scouting reports. We used to all we did was talk and think football. But again, with my injury problems, I got hurt. I think it was week 2 or 3, and I missed a good 5 games my senior year, right. And then came back against Cheshire. I believe it was Cheshire, North Haven, and Derby the last 3 games, and then Derby we were heavy underdogs and ended up.
I think they were 8-1 going.
They were 8-1,
right? Or actually 9-1.
Yeah, because it was an 11-game season.
Yeah.
They were 9-1. We were 6-4.
Right.
And
it was a Saturday.
Yeah, it was a canceled game,
yeah.
A postponed game, and I remember that the night before we played the game. I remember with all the kids I played with, really believing we were going to win the game, and when we showed up the next morning, there was something different. That day was very special because we kind of knew we were all together and we were
right.
gonna give it our best. And I think that was one of the parts in your life where you look back and you say, you knew something special was going to happen with the kids I was with, the seniors I was with, and we ended up in overtime. Pat Kelly kicked a field goal in
right.
overtime, and we won 10-7. Derby went on to win they beat Immaculate to win the States that year.
Right.
And
they had a big win against Ansonia, who was number 1 in the state. So, I mean, they really had a tremendous football team. And
yeah, they were very, very good. It was a huge
off.
upset, and they were better than us. I see those guys. I see a lot of those guys now. They were definitely better than us. It just that was one of those things where everything fell into place. Things worked out for us, and
right.
It was one of the there's been a lot of upsets in that rival with Derby and Shelton, and I was fortunate enough to be 3 years in a row on the right end, and they were all good teams. It wasn't like there was any team.
They were all close games.
They were all close games, and they were all very good teams, and I was fortunate there. Unfortunate that we never beat Ansonia, but fortunate. Derby was our big game. That was our
right.
where I know Derby's big game was always Ansonia.
Right. So tell me about the Shelton Derby rivalry to you, though. I mean, what is that week like? It's a short week, but you also have most of the time you had the bye before the Derby Shelton game. So for you as a player, and that's your big game. I mean, how nervous are you going into that game?
Oh, you're nervous. Yeah, that's I think I was more nervous. Not about the game, but that it was coming to an end.
Right.
So my senior year, I was like, what am I going to do? I had no plans for college, and football was all I ever really,
right.
That's all I ever did. It's all I was ever about. So I was more nervous of it ending
right.
than I was playing the game. Like I said, playing for Bob Riggio, you were more nervous going to practice. You were more nervous making a mistake.
Yeah.
You were more nervous about other things. You weren't nervous about a game. And that was one thing that was kind of different about Barbergio than other coaches that I've been around. You weren't nervous to play. You wanted to play. He made practices so hard that the games were easy.
Right.
And he did it in the right way. I don't mean that to be a negative at all.
But I think he was the type of coach, too, that where he would yell a lot in practice. During the game, he didn't yell because he felt like it was too much pressure for you guys to play the game. He wasn't going to scream at you during the game. I mean, that seemed to be his philosophy.
It was.
Yeah.
When I didn't figure, I didn't really figure him out in my younger years as a player. But coaching with him, I figured him out, and I realized what he was doing and how he was doing it. So, like I said before, he was more interested in how he was coaching men, boys into men, than he was winning. The winning you have to do if you want to stay involved in the program, and that has to come.
Right.
And it will come once you have the kids believing in you, and that's what he did. So I was more nervous of it all ending because I wasn't sure where I was headed.
Right.
So that was more of the problem for me. The rivalry, I think maybe a week after we played my senior year, I was hanging out with the guys from Derby.
Right.
It was a rivalry, but it wasn't hated. It wasn't like we didn't talk to them, we hated them. It wasn't, one of those rivalries where I didn't talk to kids from Derby. I ended up coaching with a lot of kids from Derby, Ronnie Leno, Chris Anderson, Dan Dune, all those kids from Derby that,
Mark Angela,
all those kids who came to Shelton and coached that 1 year as freshmen.
Right.
It wasn't a hated rivalry. It was a very respectful rivalry, I guess is the way to put it.
Right. So what was the feeling like, though? I mean, obviously it's a great feeling, like you said, your sophomore year, it was a close game. You beat them 7-3, and then junior year. And just seeing the crowds, too, as a player, you're in awe. But as a senior, you're playing a team that's basically undefeated. Not undefeated, but they're 9-1 with a shot to go to the playoffs, and you knock them off on their home field. I mean, did you just want to stay on that field the entire day?
We did stay for a long time.
Right.
We did. Leading up to the game, Shelton and Derby have this luncheon every year. Right. The Rotary Club puts it on. And the practice we had the day before that, things weren't going as Coach Riggio planned. Right. And he got a little upset. And we started doing these things called up-downs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yep. And we remembered, one kid always counted because we seemed to do them quite frequently, and he always wanted to count, and we wanted to, see how many did we do today, how many up downs we do today, and I don't remember the exact number. I do believe it was 286 was the exact number, but that's up for discussion. But I remember when we were done, when we would start every time he'd say cow lines, he'd yell out, and everyone would go to their spot in cow lines, and it was 5 yards apart, in kind of like a big square. And we went through the first 100, and we kept going. And when we finished, everyone was in a tight circle and helping each other up. And at the time, we're like, he's killing us. Like, we have a game in 2 days. Right. And he's killing us before this game. But what he did, once I realized after, we had to become one. We had to play together. Right. And he did that through that drill. At the time, we didn't know what we thought. This is nuts. We're doing so many up downs. We're playing in 2 days. But what he was doing was creating us or having us believe that we could win, help each other by helping each other. Right. And I remember towards the end, before we did the last couple, we were helping each other up, pulling each other up, and he said, "Now, you know how to win. You can play together and help each other to win." Right. And then from that point, everyone went from "we're never going to beat these guys" to "we can win if we stick together and help each other." And that really, it changed everyone, even the underclassmen. There was an underclassman. He was a great player. His name was Tom Oko.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And he was
very good running back.
Very good. He was a sophomore, and I remember after that he said, "We're going to win." And he never said a word. He was a very quiet kid, great player, and he goes, "We're going to win this game." And everyone started believing after that practice, and that was one of those things that I get together with my friends now, and we still talk about it. Right. And that was the turning point of our season, even though it was only 2 days before the end of the season. And we ended up
7-4, right?
7-4 and winning, celebrating on that field for as long as we could, and
Right.
it was just something that as a senior football player, at Shelton at the time, the Valley football was so big, and we had beaten
Right.
Seymour, we did lose to Ansonia, and we had beaten Derby, and it was an amazing. It was to end my football career that way was something I still happy about.
Right. And, back then, too, Coach, if you beat Derby, most of the time that was good enough for the fans.
Oh,
that
yes.
was like your championship.
Yes, it was.
As if Derby were to beat Ansonia, it would be Derby's championship. Same thing, if Seymour beat Derby, whoever their rivalry might be. Back then, fans cared about the game, and they marked it on their calendar. And for you guys, Derby was your game. It would have been nice to beat Ansonia, but those fans in Shelton, they wanted to beat Derby.
Yes, that was it. That was when you from 8th grade. As soon as you get to the high school, it was beat Derby. That was the one thing
Right.
it was the big game. We had some good wins in my career as a player, but none of them are even close to equal as the 3 wins we had on Thanksgiving, my sophomore,
Right.
junior, and senior year. Those were the ones that I remember. I remember the plays and the scores and who made the tackle. And I
Right.
remember the scouting report. There were some scouting reports that we would go over the night before, and Coach Riggio would say something or do something funny, and I remember those parts of scouting report. But I remember the positions, the numbers, of all the Derby players. Still, I mean, if we had hours and hours, I can go through the whole. My
Right.
son and I talk. I'm like, yeah, this kid played linebacker. He's number 75. Fossey, he was
He was a great
he was
player.
unbelievable
Yeah.
player. They had Olenowski at tight end, number 86.
Tommy Abel, our receiver.
Tom Abel, number 81. His kid's playing now at
Yeah.
Derby.
Yeah.
He was
Dan Shea.
Dan
Yeah.
Shea was number
Yeah.
60. He played center and linebacker.
Right. Yeah.
Jadek.
Another underrated player.
And there was a kid who was a junior. The senior Sheehy. He was 45.
And he was a hard hitter.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There was a few underclassmen, but we basically could, say the position, the number, where they played,
Right.
How many their stats, how many tackles they had. I mean, Fossey led the league in tackles. He had like 123 tackles going into our
Right.
game.
Yeah.
So we had every game.
And they had about 6 shutouts that year, Derby.
Yeah,
So it wasn't
they
easy
were
to score
very
on
good
them.
as being immaculate, and winning the state championship.
Right.
That was definitely one of the better Derby teams.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So let me ask you this, Coach. Your senior year comes to an end, and at the banquet, you're awarded the Coach's Award for Excellence. Now, maybe now as an adult, you get an award, you may not feel as honored as you did when you were a kid, but it had to be a great feeling as a senior, a guy who never really played in the program till 8th grade, to get the Coach's Award, because basically that tells you, the coaches all agreed that you were a hard worker and stuff like that. It had to be a great feeling.
Yeah, I was actually very surprised winning. I thought Mike Bucci, who went on to play in college, was a great running back, scored most of the touchdowns. He was probably the best player we had on the team at the time. There was other players more deserving of the Coach's Award than I was, I thought. But it was something where I remember talking to Riggio when I was coaching with him after. I said, "Why did I get the award? When there was other kids more deserving?" And we talked about it, and because now I was able to, talk with him as from
Right.
coach to coach instead of coach to player, and he had brought up a few points that I realized were important to the game of football: leadership and camaraderie and things like that, and being a good teammate. And so that's why I think I won the award, and it was obviously very gratifying. I was very
Right.
happy, but I didn't play for awards, and I don't think it mattered in how things played out for me coaching. I would have coached whether I won the award or not, but
Right.
yes, it was great. But I think the awards that I got were the friendships I made with the guys that I still talk
Right,
to
right.
today. Those awards were the big ones.
Right. So now I believe you became an assistant under Coach Riggio his final season, 1987.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you this before we get into the 87 season, because that was a very good team. What's the difference between playing for Coach Riggio and coaching with him? Is he just as hard on you as a coach?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
He's just as hard.
Yeah.
More time. Like we would go to his house Sunday mornings and leave Sunday late night. We'd go through every film, every player. The work was incredible, but it helped me in my coaching career.
Right.
Just like playing for him helped me as a person. Coaching with him helped me in my coaching career on how to work, how to do things.
Right.
I was still very young. I just graduated. I was still very young, so I was still learning.
Right.
And I was trying to do the best I can for him. But he was great with me. He was helpful in teaching me to coach and how to reach the players. I was a good go-between with the kids that were in the program and him. So it was only 1 year, but I learned a lot with him.
Right. Now that team was a very good team, as I mentioned. I can remember a game against Ansonia. You guys were up 7-0 most of the game. Ansonia scored late. They went for a 2-point conversion. Beat you guys 8-7. But I just remember that game was back and forth defensively. Both teams were tremendous. I mean, just talk about this. If Bob Riggio would have stuck around Shelton, I have to believe he would have gotten you guys a couple state titles. Would you agree?
Yes, for sure. He was a fantastic coach. He really was. And back then there was just 2 teams went to the states. There wasn't all these playoffs, and the CIAC has changed the playoffs.
You couldn't lose a game. I mean, you maybe could lose one if you were lucky.
And the program was at that point, we turned it into a winning program, and now it was trying to get from that winning the Housatonic to getting to win a state championship. Right. So it was getting ready to take the next step. And at that time it was his last year, so he was.
And nobody knew that. I think he resigned late in the spring. So
he actually coached. I do believe he coached spring the following year.
Right, and
then things happened and he moved on.
Right.
And then obviously Tony Branca took over. And then again another. He was basically a father figure in my life. He was, I spent a lot of time.
And that's a guy, if anybody doesn't know, Coach Tony Branca, he's been with the Shelton program since he was a player, I believe, I want to say 72, 73.
Yeah.
And I mean, after he left as a head coach at the end of the 93 season, he returned and he's coached the freshman team. He's coached, Pop Warner, a little AYF. He coached with you in Newtown.
Me in Newtown, yeah. Me and Tony have been together since I was a freshman. He kind of took me under his wing. He was basically, like I said, a father figure all the way through my high school years. And then when I started coaching, we just started hanging out together, and we coached together at all these places. And it's one of those relationships that Tony has been such a great friend, and we've had so many good times together. So many clinics and things that we've done together have been just so memorable.
And when you look at Shelton football, he's one of the guys I look at that is Shelton football, because, I mean, he's had a love for that program for as long as I can remember. And it's not always easy for somebody to leave a head coaching position and then come back as an assistant. Once you've kind of ran your own team, it's kind of hard to go back and, be an assistant again. But his love for the kids and his love for the game is unbelievable.
It really is. He has no ego. He's not, and he does it for the right reasons. He actually coached my son last year. My son was a freshman. He was on the freshman staff.
Right.
And he coached with me in AYF 8th grade.
Yeah.
So, and he coached with me at Newtown, and I coached with him at Shelton.
Yeah.
So we've been in different settings, different levels, different settings together. And it didn't matter what setting or what level he was coaching. He really does a great job with those kids.
Right.
And, he's amazing. So when he got the head job after Riggio, I stayed on with him and was his defensive coordinator right away.
Right. So let's talk about that 88 team, because that was a magical year for Shelton. The one loss was to Ansonia, but otherwise, I mean, you guys basically ran the table, and you kind of did it sometimes effortlessly, the way, I mean, you guys would play. You guys just came ready every game. I could think of Derby. Derby was 8-1. You guys were 8-1, and I mean, you guys beat them 21-7. That was a very good Derby team. Cheshire also had a team that was decent that year. Steve Adazio had just taken over.
Yep.
So, there were a lot of good teams in the Hoosie. Seymour, only had 2 losses that year. And so, you had a lot of good teams in the Hoosie that year. So talk about that 88 team a little bit.
Yeah, 88. Well, I remember I was coaching the defense, and we were solid. We had players. It was to the point where we knew we were very good, but
Right.
Coach Branca was in his first year. I was the defensive coordinator. I was very young. I think I was 20 maybe, and we started winning. We were looking and we're like, we've never won a state championship.
Right.
It's never been done in Shelton through all the good teams in the 60s, and I know they had the rough times in the 70s, and then Coach Riggio brought it back in the 80s, but they never went to a state playoff game. So, we were starting to look at this and say, this has never been done. Are we going to be the team? And,
Right.
I remember Coach Branca, when we, the night before we played Newington, we were talking about it, and he's like, I just don't, I don't even know what we were going to be able to do different to win a game, because it's never been done.
Right.
And, I said, just do what you're doing. We're going to carry on the way we've carried on all season long.
Right.
And we'll see. We'll let the chips fall where they may. And then we blocked the extra point. I see that picture all the time of Todd Gossert diving and blocking the extra point. And John Kearns was on that team. John's older brother Ron, he graduated with me. I played with Ron, and he was one of the 7 that I graduated with. We were very, very good friends. We used to make fun of Ronnie all the time because his brother was, as a 6th or 5th grader, he was on the PAT team. He would have to run out and give Pat Kelly his kicking shoe, because back then you had to put on the square toe kicking shoe. So every time we scored, Pat Kelly would have to take his shoe off, and John Kearns would run out and give him his shoe. So we always made fun of Ronnie that Johnny was on the PAT team and not Ronnie. But John was a great player. He coaches at Shelton now.
Right.
He's been there for years. That team was fantastic. It was.
And it's funny. Whenever you win a championship, it's never easy. There's always obstacles along the way. And one of the things that was interesting, the day of that game, I believe you guys had an issue where they almost didn't let one of your star players play.
I think it was John Kearns.
Yeah, because of his birth certificate. They didn't because what happened was, I think Coach Branca always went by the roster or the team picture to pick the players, and he had wore a different number. Something happened, and they almost did not let him
Or he missed the team photo, and they just looked at the team photo. There was something that went on, and he was actually going to be ineligible, and they had to get the nurse.
He's a key player.
Yeah, he's definitely a key player. He was, they had to do a few things, and it ended up working out. There was no wrongdoing. It was just an oversight, basically. And then he ended up playing, and we won 10-9. And that was, I remember, Branca was crying, and I was like, all right, stop crying. It was like an hour later, and he was still, he was so happy. Because he truly loved the kids, and he was more happy for the kids winning than he was for himself. And he deserved to win, putting all the time in that he's put into all the programs.
And what's great about him is, I had him on recently, and he credits Riggio. He says, I was the coach, but Riggio built that team. He was very, complimentary about that. And that's the thing, too. One person doesn't do it. Everybody has to kind of do it together. And Riggio definitely gets some credit for the state championship because he built the program back. And, Branca gets credit for making sure it's stayed a good program.
Yeah, Tony Branca has no ego. He does it for all the right reasons. He's not doing it for himself. And he gave credit where credit was due. And obviously, Coach Branca deserves a lot of credit, too, because he did, win the first state championship Shelton ever won. He had to do something along the way for a year there. So I think a lot of things came into play, and a lot of you do need more than one person and more than one player, and you need all the little things to kind of work out. It's very difficult to win a championship. It's very difficult.
Especially in a sport like that, because week in and week out, you're getting banged up. Injuries play a factor. You have to hope you could have the same team you start with at the end of the season.
That's true.
That's not always easy. Let me ask you this. Your second year as a coach, your first year as the defensive coordinator, Did you put a lot of pressure on yourself that year?
Yeah, I think I bit off a little bit more than I can chew. Being so young and being a defensive coordinator that young, but I kept going back to what Coach Riggio taught me. Just look at film, get better, do the things that you can control. And as the season went on, we had this giant defensive playbook. I wanted to do many things. As the season went on, it got smaller and smaller and smaller until we just did a few things defensively and let the players play. Right. And we just got better. And I learned, each year it took some time, but I learned that, the players got to be able to play. And,
right.
and we kind of downsized the defensive playbook, and things worked out great. And then I was so into it after that. I really studied the game and really wanted to be a part of the game every chance I got. I started coaching all-star
right.
games, and everywhere I can go, I was getting into coaching.
So you were loving coaching.
I was loving it, yeah.
Let me ask you this. What was, for you in the beginning, the thing you struggled with the most as a coach? Was it scouting? Was it watching film? Was it, making sure you had the right players?
I loved every bit of coaching. I loved I had nothing going on, so the time it didn't matter how much time it took. It didn't matter how much work was involved. I loved every bit of coaching. The coaching clinics, the breaking down of film. There wasn't one thing about coaching that I said, I didn't really get into that. I loved being with the team, the players,
right.
my fellow coaches. There wasn't one thing I didn't like about coaching. That's why it just took off in my life, and I started coaching youth sports. I coached around the calendar year. Believe it or not, I want to say in 1989, I took the freshman basketball job under
right.
Joe Sedlock. So from 1989, I coached football and freshman basketball, and then I did lacrosse and youth lacrosse. Coach Branca talked me into being the
right.
director of the girls' youth program. So from 1989, I coached around the calendar year until just last season.
Wow.
So 89 to 2015.
And you have to have a love for it, because you know what? As you know, those jobs don't pay real great money. You don't do it for the money. You do it for the kid. If I could go back and say, well, how much money I made in coaching I would do everything I did in coaching all over again for nothing. Right. All of the people in my life, all of my friends, a lot of the things that my family is a part of revolves around me coaching. And it's been just a great setting for me through all of my life at all levels. Even, like I said to you earlier, the youth level was so rewarding, coaching my daughter right.
and coaching my son. When I left Newtown, I resigned it was my dream job to be a head coach someday. And I was at Newtown. I resigned to coach youth
right.
with my son and daughter. And every job that I had in coaching was rewarding.
Right.
Everyone, even the ones that had some tough times in it, I still look back and it's been rewarding. The people I met, it has been fantastic.
Right. Now, before we get to the 95 team, which was another state championship, a magical year, a team that sometimes doesn't get the credit it deserves is the 91 Shelton team. That was with star running back John Eason. I think Danny Field.
Bobby Ayer was a fullback.
Right,
yeah.
I think Danny Field was the quarterback.
You
guys had a very solid team, and you guys won the Housatonic League that year with a 9-2 record. Your only two losses were to Notre Dame of West Haven and Ansonia. So you start the season 1-2, and it's very easy to panic when 3 games in you've already got 2 losses. But then the team just kind of took it from there. Talk about that 91 team a little bit.
I remember we fumbled on like the 6-yard line going in to beat Notre Dame. They had a player, Tarek Saleh, went to Wisconsin.
And that was a good Notre Dame team.
Yeah, they were very good.
State champions.
State champs, yeah. So we lost to 2 state champs that year. I think Ansonia
was the runner-up, but they were still a great team.
Yeah, they lost.
Right.
They went to the States. They lost to
New London.
Yeah.
Right.
But both teams, so it was one of those years where we played 2 very, very good teams. And we played them tight. Tarek Saleh in Notre Dame had beaten us it was I think it was 7-3 was the score, I think.
Right. Yeah, it was a good game. And the Ansonia game was a great game. It, kind of fell apart late, but right there, you guys were up at the half. I mean, it was a great game.
Yes. So that year, Danny Field was a quarterback. That was when coaching was very comfortable for me. I've been defensive coordinator now for a couple of years, 88, 90, 91, so it's my fourth year. Now we have things going on. Now I feel very comfortable, and we started doing some things defensively that I was, happy with. So I became more comfortable as a coach there, and now I think, looking back, that's where I started to turn the corner. Sometimes you turn the corner as a player.
Right.
That's when I turned the corner as a coach and started to become, a better coach. And that team was very good. Those kids worked really hard. I remember because the 2 years before that, I think we were 4-6 and 4-6, or 5-5. We were in that range of average. And those kids, I remember the off season, they put it together and they worked hard.
Right.
And we ended up with a very, very good year. I know we won the Housatonic and didn't qualify for the States because of the 2 losses.
Right, but sometimes it doesn't really matter because if you win your league and you have a great year like that, it's still a championship and it doesn't take away from anything. Again, it was tough to make the States back then. The margin for error, there wasn't a lot of room for it. You couldn't lose more than 2 games or you were pretty much one loss didn't guarantee you a shot. So, I mean, that team to me, though, really was an underrated team, and it was one of the better Shelton teams.
Yes, very good. All those kids who I see a lot of those guys still today are fantastic team. They were probably right up there with the 95 team. Like if 91 played 95, I don't know who would win the game.
And the thing is, they both, we'll get to 95 in a second, but both those teams came into the season having losing records the year before. And nobody really expected a lot from either team.
The expectations weren't there.
Right.
And, remembering both teams, they were very similar. Like you said, as juniors, they didn't win. They came into their senior year, expectations were low. And one of the things that I remember about both of those years was we were down early in the season. Like in 91, I think we were 1-2.
Right.
And in 95, we had lost early to Notre Dame and West Haven again.
0-1, I believe. Or 1-1.
1-1, I think. Right. It was earlier in the season.
Yeah.
So there was still a question mark, but then we rattled off, all the wins, went to the States in 95 and ended up beating New Britain in the semis and then Trumbull for the championship. But those 2 teams were both very, very good. Probably the 2 most talented teams in coaching that I've been around. I was with another talented team at Newtown, but those 2 stand out as very talented Shelton football teams in the years that I was there.
Definitely. So now let's fast forward to 95. Coach Brinka leaves after the 93 season. Shelton brings in a legendary baseball coach, a legendary basketball coach, and Coach Benanto. And he had also coached football at Yale on the freshman level. But he really didn't have a reputation yet for coaching football on the high school level. He comes in, you guys go 4-6 the first year. But then, as we said, the 95 team, you guys win the state title. Talk about what a great coach Coach Benanto is.
Yeah, when he first came in, I wasn't sure if I was going to stay because at the time, I also was applying for the head job. Because I felt at the time I'm ready to step up and take over.
Right. And I think he had coached 1 year under Brinka.
Yes, he did. Yes. He was an assistant 1 year for a year. So I was feeling out other options, but I stayed with Joe because of the junior class. Was a lot of the kids I really had really had a nice relationship with. Tim Kiley and Steve Szynski and Steve Souza and Steve Darby and all the kids that I've coached for 2 years. I couldn't leave. I was really attached to this group, and you kind of knew something was going to be special with them. So we had the rough year the first year, and then that 95 season, everything fell into place. Coaching with Joe was a great learning experience for me. Another example of who you coach with and taking something from the coaches that you're coaching with and bringing it into your coaching style to help me down the road. He was fun. The one thing that I remember about Joe was he would say to me 100 times a week, "Can we just play base defense?" Because I would like to blitz and do all these things. He would yell, "Just play base defense, Roberts." He was an amazing coach, and he won so many championships in baseball. And he's such a
and he was a great basketball coach as well.
And you know, it was definitely a learning experience for me.
Right.
He really taught me what to do in certain circumstances. So it definitely shaped me again into my coaching career on things that I needed to do to be a head coach.
Right. You know, Ken, sometimes a loss, it's hard to believe that a loss could feel like a win. But in 95, I think a loss that really set the tone for you guys was a late game against Cheshire. I think it was the 7th game of the year. You guys were
3-0.
Right. You guys went up to Cheshire. You almost pull off the upset. The thing is, they still had Ian McIntosh, who was he had taken over at running back for his brother.
Yep.
He was a great player. You know, I mean, their line was unbelievable. And to hold them to 3 points, you know, no touchdowns, 3 points. I mean, you guys lost the game that night, but in a lot of ways it was a victory. In my opinion.
There was a rivalry when I started coaching. I thought that the rivalry of Shelton Derby was number one. The second biggest rivalry was Shelton Cheshire.
Right.
Shelton Cheshire was such a big rivalry. That was the game that kind of took over besides Derby. That was the one you wanted to win. They were a very good team. Steve Adazio was a very good coach. As you know, he went on. He was at Florida. He was at Notre Dame. Now he's the head coach at Boston College.
Right.
And that was the one that I wanted because I knew he was such a good coach. And it was more of, you know, going against Steve. So basically, I really wanted to play Cheshire. That's the game I wanted.
Right.
So I remember when we beat him in '91 with Brian Fetty and Danny Field. That year in '91, we beat them. We were there.
They were 5-0 to start the year.
They were 5-0. We beat them, and then after that loss, when Cheshire lost to us, that's when they started their long run.
Yeah.
And we were that team, and
they won 49 in a row. Yeah.
49 in a row.
Yeah.
And then we ended up before Prep had beaten them. We were there. We were at 3-0. I remember the game up in Cheshire. You know, we had a holding penalty late. We had a screen pass to Steve Szynski down our sideline. He ended up down about the 10-yard line, and they called holding, and we ended up not scoring, and we had lost 3-0. But like you said, there was something. You know, we then thought we're good enough to play with anybody,
right?
And that team was very good. Tim Kiley was an all-state inside linebacker. He had an amazing year that year.
Right.
Steve Darby went on to play at UConn. Was a great player that year. Steve Szynski, one of the toughest running backs Shelton's ever seen. And Shelton's had some really good running backs.
And he also had Corey Somerville.
The names go on forever in that year.
Yeah. Jimmy Grabowski, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it was a tackle. But you know, once we got into the States and we were playing New Britain, who was probably one of the best teams we've. You know, again, we were ready for whoever, because mentally we were ready for whoever.
Right.
And that was because we had played Cheshire.
And it never felt like you guys were in trouble in that game. It just felt like even though
they believed we were going to win.
Right. You know, because even though New Britain hung around for a while, it never felt like Shelton was going to let it get away.
I think once we had, like you said, that loss to Cheshire kind of set the tone. We can play with anybody.
Right.
And you know, we just have to stay positive, and we did, and we ended up with the state championship that year.
Right. So let me ask you, it's always great to get that first one, but then, like nothing else, you win, people want to win again, and you want to win again. So what was it like to get that second championship?
That was the second one I was more involved with. Because my first one, I was first-year D coordinator. I was not even pretty raw. You know, it happened so fast. I wasn't sure what was going on. This one, I was a part of. I felt really good about beating Trumbull. And I felt I was really close with these kids. I still am close with most of those guys. And it was one of those teams where I really felt.
And Coach Bonanto basically didn't interfere with you.
Oh,
right?
no,
He
was
it.
great. He
Right.
said, he would say just play base defense every once in a while. But other than that,
Right.
he was great. He did the offense, and he basically he was a great head coach. He let the coaches coach, had the
Right.
players play. That's why he's got so many wins. You don't have that many wins if you're not a good coach.
Right.
So he let me be who I was, and I felt a part of that championship for sure.
Right. And, there's always that image I remember of, I think it was a sigh of relief, but also, it was, you weren't the type to always show big emotion, but you walked down to the sideline and you just gave a little fist like, yes, we did it. I mean, that fist had to be more for the fact that the camaraderie you had with these boys and to be able to win a championship with them. Because as you said, you had thought about leaving. You didn't want to leave these guys. So to be able to win a championship with them, I mean, that had to be more gratifying.
Yes, because I was very close to leaving. And, I stayed with the kids because I had such a relationship and
Right.
it was so attached to this group. And then winning it was, I was like this just because I thought, well, I made the right decision to stay more than anything. So, it was definitely one of the best wins that season was probably ranks up there in the top 3 seasons of my coaching career.
Right. So after the 95 season, I think you came back for 2 more seasons at Shelton as an assistant. Talk about the 96 team, because I really thought that was going to be a great Shelton team, but injuries really hurt you guys towards the end of the year. But that 96 team, it looked like they were going to do great things. In fact, I think they beat Cheshire that year, which not a lot of, Cheshire had not lost much. I think they finally got knocked off early in the season, but you guys were the second team to knock them off. But then towards the end of the year, you could really see the injuries, and they weren't able to put it together. What happened there?
I think it was one of the injuries were definitely a big part of it. The other thing that year was I think a lot of the kids just started getting tired, and it was like there were some things that just weren't, like when you win a championship, you have these things that all fall together, and it was one of those years where this happened, that happened, some things just weren't right. And and it was time for me to kind of maybe look at somewhere else, coach somewhere else.
Right. How difficult was it to leave Shelton?
I still remember saying I was leaving. It was very, very hard.
And I'm sure you went up to the players, kind of talked to them.
I remember it's still very, very, I still don't know if I should have left.
You went to the town you raised in. But you know what? At the same time, I mean, you probably owed it to yourself to take it to the next level, and Coach Bonanto wasn't going anywhere.
Exactly.
So.
He wasn't going anywhere, and I felt like I wanted to, I loved coaching so much, I wanted to do things my way, and I started to look at other options, and I knew I was never going to be a head coach staying there, so, I was kind of like looking at other options at the time. It was the biggest, hardest, at the time, was so difficult for me to choose to leave because I played there.
Right.
I invested so much time there, and I really loved it there. There was, I made so many friends, and,
right.
I went to high school there, so I knew all the teachers and the principals, and I knew everyone. It was so comfortable there. I really, it was a very difficult decision.
Right. Well, if part 1 didn't get you pumped up, part 2 definitely will, because we're going to talk about Newtown football. AYF. It all happens in part 2. For part 1 and Ken Roberts, I'm Mike Cannici saying good night, everyone.